Hey everybody, my name is Corey Singer. I'm autistic. I'm here to talk to you about the autistic experience. In my last video, I gave a review of Sia's movie Music. And me, as long as the rest of the autism community, did not like this movie. So today, I'm going to be talking about my list that I made of top 11 movies about autism. Before we get started, if you want to see more autistic content, go to my TikTok page, The Corey Singer. I will link that down below, along with my Instagram and my website, CoreySinger.com. Make sure you stick around for the end of the video because I have an announcement. Now, I picked 11 movies because these were the 11 movies I thought of that were better than Sia's movie Music, about a little girl with autism named Music. It was not a good movie. And keep in mind, this list is very subjective, and if you have any thoughts on the movies on I list, please leave a comment down below. So starting off with number 11, we have Rain Man. This is a very well-known movie among the autism community and just movies in general. So the movie is about Tom Cruise, who plays a car dealer, and he finds out his father dies, and so he goes back to his hometown in Cincinnati to go to his father's funeral. And his father leaves a will, but all of his father's millions of dollars is not left to Tom Cruise. So he finds out that he has an autistic brother that he never met, played by Dustin Hoffman. Now, many people in the autistic community do not like this movie very much because really when people think of autism, they think of Dustin Hoffman's performance. Like the very first thing they think of with autism is Dustin Hoffman's performance. And it gets quite insulting actually. Like whenever I tell people that I'm autistic, they automatically think I'm supposed to look like Dustin Hoffman and Rain Man or act like Dustin Hoffman and Rain Man. There are things that Dustin Hoffman does portray which are pretty true. Like the stimming, he does a lot. He also sticks to a very strict schedule that when is broken, he starts to freak out. And also on Tom Cruise's part, he does a good job. I think it shows the frustration that neurotypicals have to deal with when they have an autistic family member and they don't know how to deal with it. And also, people consider the fact that Dustin Hoffman was neurotypical ableist, and people think this movie is ableist. But I actually tend to look at this movie as a very positive thing for the autism community as well, because this was probably the first movie really to really tackle the subject of autism, and it got the ball rolling for all the future movies, which I'm going to be talking about on this list. And yeah, it got the conversation started because back then, autism was still a bit of a taboo subject. And this was the first movie to kind of talk about it in a mainstream way. And number 10, we have What's Eating Gilbert Grape. Now, Gilbert Grape is the main character, but his brother, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, displays traits of autism. And many people have concluded that this character is autistic, which is why I included this movie on this list. Whenever I talked about the fact that Sia did not cast an autistic actress in the movie Music, people always bring up this movie. People then say, oh, why didn't people complain about Leonardo DiCaprio being cast as an autistic person? First of all, this movie was made before I was even born. Second of all, this movie is a product of its time. And at least compared to Sia, Leonardo DiCaprio actually put in the time and effort to try and accurately portray an autistic person. Leonardo DiCaprio hung out with autistic people and really tried to do this character as realistic as he possibly could. Now, this does bring up the point that like there are actors who play disabled characters for the sake of trying to get an award, which is, that's ableist in and of itself. But yeah, and the whole point of this movie isn't the fact that this character is autistic. The main character is Gilbert Grape, and him trying to choose between his family and trying to start a life of his own. I do really like this movie. I think this is a very well done movie. I actually do think Leonardo DiCaprio does give a decent performance in this movie, and yeah, definitely check it out if you can. It's really good. At number 9, we have Burning Bright. Not many people have heard of this movie, but I personally like it. This is a horror thriller. It's about a teenage girl and her autistic brother who are trapped inside their house during a hurricane with a tiger. And so this movie really does raise the stakes. The film opens up with a teenage girl checking her autistic brother out of a hospital. So they show that this kid has high support needs, and she's trying to make sure this kid is okay while they're being chased and pursued by a tiger in their house in the middle of a hurricane. So this movie really does raise the stakes, and it's really well done. The performances are really good. The young actor who was cast to play the autistic character does a really good job despite his age. I don't know if the actor actually had autism or not, but I thought he did a believable job. So yeah. At number 8, we have The Night Clerk. Now, this movie is a coming-of-age story mixed with a murder mystery rolled into one. And it's about a night clerk named Bart who is autistic. They say he has Asperger's syndrome. and becomes the prime suspect of a murder that happens at the hotel at which he is a clerk. And it's a very suspenseful movie. It keeps you glued and wondering what's going on in the movie. You're trying to wonder, did this kid actually commit the murder, or is he a victim of circumstance? So Ty Sheridan is the actor who plays Bart, the autistic character. He does an okay job. You can definitely tell he's not autistic, but he gets the point across that he is autistic. He does display a lot of the autistic traits, especially with Asperger's syndrome, which I was diagnosed with. Even though it's an outdated term, that's what they say he has. He has a lack of social awareness. He says what's on his mind. He takes things literally, This movie shows how an autistic person can feel trying to fit in with society, because this society is not built for people who are autistic or neurodivergent in general. So he hides video cameras in all the hotel rooms so he can learn how to communicate and act like regular people. One thing I think this movie does well is show when an autistic person wants to introduce change in their life, we are willing to do it, because we are known for having a strict routine and having a hard time with change. But when we do want to change, we dedicate to it and we commit to the change. At number 7, we have Adam. And this movie has a special place in my heart because this was the very first movie where I could relate to a movie character myself. I was told I have Asperger's syndrome growing up. I honestly couldn't comprehend it growing up until me and my family watched this movie, because none of us have ever really seen it before. And watching this movie, it was the first time I was like, oh my God, that's me. That's me on the screen. And Hugh Dancy plays the autistic character Adam, and I thought he did a really good job. There are many scenes that really reminded me of myself. There's a party scene, and Adam is talking to this woman that he never met before, and he starts info dumping about outer space, because outer space is his special interest. And she is becoming so overwhelmed by all the information that Adam is giving her, and just keeps talking and talking and talking and not picking up the hint that she's ready to move on. And when his girlfriend, played by Rose Byrne, takes him away because she realizes what's going on, they just hold on the woman, and she lets out a sigh of relief. I can imagine I've done that to many people myself. So on that aspect, I can relate to the character. And also it shows mind blindness very well. It shows the social disconnect that can come with autism. Like, there's a scene where he gets fired from his job. After he gets fired, he goes to Rose Byrne's job, which is a kindergarten school. And he just looks at the playground, and the cops come. And she has to let the cops know that he's not a pedophile, he's just autistic. And it shows that social disconnect. If there's one thing I don't like about this movie, is that it shows that in order for Adam to get by in the world, he has to mask his autism, which is kind of disheartening, which is unfortunately the sad truth with autism. I made a video about masking. I'll leave a link for that down below. Masking, sometimes we have to mask in order to fit in with society, and that's what this movie shows, which is unfortunate. It's a complaint, but it's kind of how it is. What differs this movie from the rest of the movies that I am going to be mentioning in this video is that this movie is a romantic comedy. It's just that one of the characters happens to have autism, and it tackles it in a way that's actually quite funny. This movie also shows how someone with autism can thrive and learn to be independent. One thing movies do with autistic characters is make the autistic character's identity about autism. Like, autism is their identity. They have no other characteristics outside of this. With this character, however, they show that he has an identity outside of his autism. For one, they show that he has a special interest, and that's in outer space. And he talks all the time about outer space, and that is his special interest. And he ends up at the end of the movie getting a job at a planetarium, which is pretty cool. And I thought that Hugh Dancy did a fantastic job playing Adam and realistically portraying autism. At number 6, we have Power Rangers, the movie from 2017. I know this is very random, but this actually is a movie that does show the positive side of autism. Billy the Blue Ranger mentions in the movie that he is on the spectrum, and his special interest is tech and what have you, and he infodumps and all that. But what's cool about this character is that his autism is not his identity. He has an identity outside of being autistic. He's like a computer nerd and all that. He's also the smartest one of all 5 Power Rangers, and he's also the bravest. There's a scene, spoiler alert, where he sacrifices himself to make sure the others survive. He also ended up being everyone's favorite character, including neurotypicals. And this really gave kids in the autism community someone to look up to. And on top of that, what is pretty cool is that Billy in this movie is a person of color. And there aren't really a whole lot of movies that show autism in people who are a person of color. So that's a plus for me. I like that this movie handled this character's autism in a very mature way and gave him a character and identity outside of being autistic compared to the other movies I had referenced. And like the last movie I mentioned, Adam, Billy has a special interest in tech. So he has an identity outside of being autistic, which is just really, really cool. And I like that Hollywood is starting to see that with autistic people, that there's more to us than our autism. At number 5, we have Guardians of the Galaxy. I know, this is even more random than the last movie I mentioned, but just hear me out. So Drax the Destroyer displays all the traits of autism. He takes everything literally. He doesn't pick up on sarcasm. He doesn't know social interaction very well. He takes everything literally, and he doesn't understand body language. He always says all the inappropriate things at the most inappropriate times. Typically, autistic people have a hard time picking up on normal social behavior, and that's what Drax displays right here. Drax also has very high intelligence, including in his vocabulary. He speaks in one tone of voice and only raises and lowers it when experiencing very extreme emotion. What's cool with Drax, though, is unlike most autistic characters, with his quirks, they're not meant to be laughed at him, as opposed, they're meant to laugh with him, because they introduce him as a very respectable character. Drax has a strong moral compass, he's very dedicated to what he wants, and he's very loyal to the group. Yes, I know, he's not technically autistic, he's an alien. But most autistic people, like myself, tend to feel like an alien, and Drax perfectly displays that. Drax is a very loving and respectful character, and it's really cool that the autism community inadvertently got their own character in the MCU, which is really, really cool. And Dave Bautista does an amazing job of playing the character. They also make this character a very noble character, which is pretty cool. At number 4, we have the documentary Asperger's Are Us. Now, this is a really cool documentary. It's basically about 4 autistic friends who put together a comedy troupe, and they were the first comedy troupe comprised of all people with autism. And their humor is very dry. I would equate it with British humor. And basically, this shows them trying to put together their last performance, but then they ended up having other performances afterwards. But it shows the friendship that these guys have. And it kind of reminded me of me and my friend group. And in my group of friends, we all have autism. I have a couple other friend groups outside of my autistic friends, but with my autistic friends, I feel the closest to and I feel the most comfortable with, and I feel like I could be myself with them. And you get that with these 4 guys all together. Like, it's just magic happens. And it shows that autistic people can have a sense of humor, and when we want to do something and put something together, we do it, and we do it well. And it also shows how each of them have their own lives and what they want to do with themselves in the future outside of their comedy troupe. Like, one of them has a special interest in trains and where trains go. And he says he would actually like to be a conductor and sees that as a very good career path for himself, being that he loves trains. They show 2 of them going to college, and actually they say in the end of the movie that they're thriving very well in college. And all 4 of them still remain close to this day. I think you can find this on Netflix. It's a very, very cool documentary, and I definitely recommend it. And it shows that autistic people can make friends, and when you make the right friends, great things can happen. At number 3, we have The Accountant, making autism badass. And I love this movie. I was genuinely surprised on how much I did love this movie. So Ben Affleck plays Christian Wolf, a certified public accountant who is also an assassin on the side. And he has autism. The movie starts out as him with a little kid getting checked into an institution by his parents, and he's putting together a puzzle. And when there's one piece missing, he starts flipping out. When a nonverbal girl brings him the missing piece, he puts it together. But then we learn it's upside down. He put the puzzle upside down with the picture underneath. And this teaches us 2 things. 1, that Christian doesn't like leaving things unfinished. And 2, he's far more interested in how the pieces fit together as opposed to the picture that it was supposed to make. One thing that this movie does compared to other autistic movies is masking. I said Adam talked about masking. This one does it even more. It actually shows a character trying to mask. He's not necessarily the best at masking, but it shows what an autistic person does in trying to mask their autism to try and fit into regular society. Even though Christian is a highly skilled accountant, he's very bad socially. There are a couple scenes that display this. There's a scene where he kills another assassin by strangling him in front of an elderly couple, and when he's done, he looks at them, smiles, and waves because he was taught that's the normal thing to do. That's his masking and not using it properly. Another example is when he's helping out the same couple and he notices that the old woman is wearing a necklace and she asks him if he likes it. He says not particularly, but there could be a good business opportunity. He's just very honest in what he thinks. There's also the love interest in Anna Kendrick, but he just cannot pick up on the social cues that she is into him. Although he's into her, he doesn't pick up the fact that she's given off signs that she wants him. This also is one of Ben Affleck's best performances in a film. He played Christian Wolf very well in this movie and did a great job playing someone with autism. When someone mistakes him for being sarcastic, he said, "No, I was not being sarcastic. I don't like sarcasm." And that's a commentary with autism. We don't like sarcasm. So I thought it was a very cool representation of autism. Very different. It's a very well-made film. I definitely recommend checking it out. And yes, I am wearing a different shirt. I am clean shaven. My hair is wet. And yes, that is because I took a shower. And it's because I forgot to talk about this movie while making the video. But that's not important. We got 2 more movies to talk about. Let's move on. At number 2, we have Temple Grandin, the movie about arguably one of the most, if not the most famous autistic people ever. So, Temple Grandin, in case you don't know who she is one of the very first, if not the first, advocates for autism. She uses her experience and her insight from having autism to advocate for people with autism and to describe autism and how it's described today, and one of the people that normalized autism. She was also a proponent for humane treatment of livestock for slaughter. She made a machine to help livestock comfortably to the slaughterhouse that I believe is still being used today. She's in Time's top 100 influential people in the heroes category. Like, this woman is just an autistic badass. And this movie talks about her upbringing and what led her to where she is today. Claire Danes plays her, and I think she does an incredible job in the movie. And it really does show autism from an autistic perspective. One scene that really stuck out to me is a scene where Temple Grandin is having sensory overload, which happens to a lot of us on the autism spectrum. One of the many examples is that she's in a cafeteria and she's surrounded by people. She hears every single person talking. She hears all the dishes clanking in the cafeteria. She hears everybody stepping, and she's getting overwhelmed because she's getting sensory overload. And this happens to me a lot. I used to work retail. I was a cashier, and many times this would happen to me. But because I was in a situation where I had the mask, I had to deal with it. But it sucks. I currently work at a job where we deal with a lot of heavy machinery, and the only way for me to get through the day is to put earplugs in, and it really helps me out. If I didn't have those earplugs in, I would get very overwhelmed throughout the day. So this movie really does portray what it can be like to have autism. It's a very well done film. I highly recommend it. And finally, my pick for the number 1 autism movie of all time. It's also one of my favorite movies of all time, Mary and Max. Not many people have heard of this movie, but it is an amazing movie nonetheless. It's an animated movie from Australia about an 8-year-old Australian girl who randomly picks someone to be a pen pal. And she picks an American man named Max, a middle-aged man with autism. And they become pen pals. Now, what's great about this movie is that it ditches the savior trope. And what do I mean by the savior trope with autism? Well, whenever there's an autistic character, there's a character who's basically, quote-unquote, the savior character. Kate Hudson's character, if you look at CS Film Music, that is Kate Hudson's character. She is the hero to Maddie Ziegler's character, Music. Also, Tom Cruise to Dustin Hoffman's character in Rain Man, and Johnny Depp's character in What's Eating Gilbert Grape being the savior to Leonardo DiCaprio's character who's autistic, and so you get the picture. And Mary Max flips that on its head. It's actually the autistic character in Max who saves Mary. Basically, Max is the savior in this movie, and that's what's really cool. And also, Max is a very lovable and relatable character to autistic people. And it's a very well-told story. And unlike all the other films on this list, this is an animated film. It's a stop-motion animated film as well. It may not be the most kid-friendly film. It deals with subjects of addiction, suicide, and death, but it's an amazing film, and I always get a little choked up towards the end because it shows character growth from a neurotypical perspective and from the perspective of Max. There's a scene where he just randomly gets this letter from this little girl in Australia, and because his routine is now shaken up, something new has been added, he freaks out. But when he commits to actually writing his first letter to this character, he sits down and he's actually quite excited. And the sequence in which he's doing the typing on the typewriter and the music is just really well done. It's a very beautiful looking movie too. and it won't overstimulate someone with autism. This is actually a very easy film to watch. And it also deals with autism in a very mature way. What's great about this movie is that Max is a very fleshed out character. He is who he is, and he's not sorry about it. In fact, in the movie, he says he would not want to be anything else than what he is, because he's happy with the way he is. And that's how he helps the 8-year-old girl, Mary, grow as a character. He thinks he's perfect the way he is. So there's my top 11 autistic movies. I hope you enjoyed that list. If you have any opinion on any of the movies I mentioned, please leave a comment down below. So here's my special announcement. I'm a singer-songwriter. And if you scroll through my older videos, you'll see I used to put up covers of other people's songs. But I'm releasing a single on the 12th of March. It's actually available for pre-order on my website, CoreySinger.com. It's going to be released on all downloading and streaming services. My single I'm releasing is called Someone, and I wrote it based off my experiences of having autism and some of the struggles I have with it. And it's kind of a song about loneliness, and that's something I've dealt with too. And that's a video I'm going to make another day, but if you guys want, please go to my website, CoreySinger.com. I'll link it down below, and you could download my song for pre-order, and it comes out on March 12th on all download and streaming services. So thank you very much, guys. I'll see you guys later. Have a nice one. Stay safe, and I'll catch you on the flip side.